For 28 years, it was more than just a wall. It was the world's most potent symbol of division. 155 kilometers of concrete, barbed wire, and death strips. The Berlin Wall. To the west, it was a scar, a wall of shame. To the east, it was the anti-fascist protection barrier. But to the people who lived in its shadow, it was simply a fact of life. A brutal, unchangeable reality. By 1989, it seemed as permanent as a mountain range. The German Democratic Republic, or GDR, celebrated its 40th anniversary in October 1989 with pomp and military parades. The state projected an image of stability, of socialist success. But behind the goose-stepping soldiers and waving flags, the foundations were crumbling. The country was hemorrhaging money. The state-run economy was a dinosaur, unable to provide the consumer goods its citizens saw every night on West German television, their broadcasts leaking through the Iron Curtain like a forbidden dream. The Trabant car, a symbol of East German industry, was made of cotton-derived plastic and had a two-stroke engine that choked the air with fumes. The waiting list to even own one was over a decade long. And then there was the fear. The Ministry for State Security, the infamous Stasi, was one of the most pervasive secret police forces in human history. It had nearly 100,000 official employees and up to 200,000 unofficial informants, neighbors spying on neighbors, colleagues on colleagues, even husbands on wives. They kept meticulous files on millions. Every whisper of dissent, every frustrated joke told in a bar, could lead to interrogation, imprisonment, or the quiet ruin of a career. This constant surveillance was the glue that held the state together, a psychological wall just as real as the concrete one. But something was changing far beyond the borders of the GDR. In Moscow, a new kind of Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, was in power. His policies had names that echoed around the world: glasnost, or openness, and perestroika, restructuring. He spoke of a common European home. Crucially, when visiting East Berlin for the 40th anniversary celebrations, he privately warned the aging, hardline East German leader, Erich Honecker, that life punishes those who come too late. He was making it clear the Soviet Union would no longer use its tanks to prop up failing communist regimes. The Brezhnev Doctrine was dead. Frank Sinatra's My Way became the new theme. The satellite states were on their own. The first physical crack in the Iron Curtain didn't happen in Berlin. It happened hundreds of miles away, in the summer fields of Hungary. On August 19, 1989, a symbolic pan-European picnic was organized at the border between Hungary and Austria. For 3 hours, the border gate was to be opened as a gesture of peace. The organizers expected a few hundred attendees. Instead, word spread like wildfire among the thousands of East German citizens vacationing in Hungary. It was a test, a gamble. Over 600 East Germans saw their chance, abandoned their Trabants, and surged across the border to freedom. The Hungarian guards, under orders not to shoot, simply watched them go. The picnic blew the door wide open. Realizing the old rules no longer applied, Hungary's reformist government made a monumental decision. On September 11, 1989, they officially opened their border with Austria. A torrent of humanity was unleashed. Tens of thousands of East Germans poured into Hungary, then across to Austria and finally to West Germany. It was a mass exodus. The GDR leadership was furious, but powerless. They had lost control of their own people. The wall was no longer a perfect seal. It was being bypassed. While thousands fled, millions remained. And within them, courage began to conquer fear. The city of Leipzig became the heart of the revolution. For years, a small group had gathered for peace prayers at the St. Nicholas Church. After the summer of escape, these gatherings spilled out onto the streets. They became the Monday demonstrations. At first, there were hundreds. The Stasi watched, intimidated, arrested. But the people kept coming. By October, the numbers swelled into the tens of thousands. They marched through the city, their footsteps echoing on the cobblestones of history. Their chant was simple, but devastatingly effective. "Wir sind das Volk." We are the people. It was a direct rebuttal to a government that claimed to rule in the people's name. It was a declaration that the true power of a nation resides in its citizens, not its leaders. Every Monday, the world watched, holding its breath. Would the regime respond with violence? The memory of the Tiananmen Square massacre in China just months earlier was fresh in everyone's minds. Hospitals in Leipzig were stocked with extra blood plasma and beds. The tension was unbearable. On October 9th, the demonstration swelled to 70,000 people. The security forces were out in massive numbers. The order to shoot was expected, but it never came. Local party bosses, the police, and the marchers themselves all contributed to keeping the peace. The sheer, overwhelming number of peaceful citizens had stared down the guns of the state, and the state had blinked. It was the psychological turning point. The people had lost their fear, and the regime had lost its will to use force. A month later, on November 4th, 500,000 people gathered in East Berlin's Alexanderplatz, demanding reform. The government was in a state of paralysis. The pressure was immense. The mass exodus was crippling the country. The protests were growing. The old guard, including Erich Honecker, had been forced out, replaced by a new, slightly less hardline administration. They knew they had to do something to release the pressure, to stop the bleeding. They decided to make a concession. They would ease travel restrictions, allowing people to leave, but only after applying for a visa through a long, bureaucratic process. It was meant to be a safety valve, a controlled release. It was not meant to be the end. Which brings us to the evening of November 9th, 1989. A routine, mind-numbingly dull government press conference is underway. The Politburo spokesman is a man named Gunnar Schabowski. He's tired. Just before the conference, he was handed a piece of paper outlining the new travel policy. He hadn't had time to read it properly, let alone understand its implications or the specific timeline for its rollout. He drones on about other party matters for nearly an hour. The journalists are bored. Some are already packing up. Then, near the end, an Italian journalist, Riccardo Erman, asks a question about travel rules. Schabowski, a little flustered, shuffles through his papers. He finds the note. He begins to read it out loud, stumbling over the bureaucratic language. He announces that private travel abroad can now be applied for without preconditions. Another journalist, Peter Brinkman, a reporter for the West German newspaper Bild, senses an opening and shouts out a question that would change the world. Wann tritt das in Kraft? When does it take effect? Schabowski is caught off guard. He scans the note again. It says nothing about a timeline. He looks to his colleagues for help, but they have no idea either. He shrugs, and in a moment of historic confusion, utters the fateful words, Das tritt nach meiner Kenntnis, ist das sofort, unverzüglich. As far as I know, that takes effect, immediately, without delay. A stunned silence falls over the room. The journalists are incredulous. Did he just say what they thought he said? Did a mid-level bureaucrat just accidentally announce the end of the Berlin Wall on live television? The news exploded. West German television channels, which most East Berliners watched, led their main evening news with it. The GDR is opening its borders. The headlines were clear and absolute. Inside their drab apartment blocks, East Berliners looked at their TV screens, then at each other. Could it be true? After 28 years of being walled in, could they just leave? Tentatively at first, a few people decided to go and see for themselves. They walked to the nearest checkpoints, like Bornholmer Strasse. Then dozens followed. Then hundreds. Then thousands. They approached the border guards, who had received no new orders and were just as confused as everyone else. The crowds grew larger, the pressure building, their chants changing from, "We are the people," to "Tor auf. Tor auf. Open the gate. Open the gate." The unstoppable force of the people was meeting the immovable object of the wall, and something was about to break.